So without further ado, take it away, Mike.
All right. Thank you, Tim. Greatly appreciate it. So yes, today we're going to talk about core cloud systems, as Tim alluded to, and I'll start to actually get into the product pretty quickly. I did want to go through a brief PowerPoint presentation just to kind of set things up and give everyone a sense of what core cloud systems is all about. So let's do that first. Basically, core cloud systems started out as an electronic forms creation tool. But one of the key aspects of that is that it is integrated with both TimberScan and Sage 300. So think of it this way. There are a number of different apps, for example, that you might be able to go to the App Store and download that might address a certain aspect of your business. Could be something in accounting, could be something in operations, what have you. Or you could, perhaps use, for example, Excel spreadsheets and those types of things to address certain things. But one of the keys is that this particular tool does allow for the integration between both TimberScan and Sage 300. And if you're not currently using TimberScan, you can have it integrate with Sage 300. Ideally, obviously, we would love for you to be using TimberScan with this because it just makes the process and the workflow that much easier. It's also a mobile application. So this can be right-sized for any type of mobile device. It could be an iPhone, an iPad, an Android device. And people can be in the field and they can be filling out various forms and applications and what have you. The whole idea and the concept behind this is to create a single source for all of your mobile requirements. So again, instead of going to the App Store and downloading a one-off app that might address one aspect of your business and then going somewhere else to address another aspect of your business, the idea behind core cloud systems is to have one source that basically does all of the mobile aspects of your organization. And another key aspect of the system is that it's highly customizable. So it's designed for your specific requirements. One of the things that a lot of applications force you to do is basically kind of fit into their requirements. So it might do some of the things that you want it to do, but not everything. Core Cloud Systems allows you to actually customize your forms and your solutions to meet your needs. So if something that you look at and you want to work with doesn't exactly fit right for you, you basically can design something that works for you and meets all of your requirements. And if it's not something that you want to design yourself, we can design it for you. We do have a series of industry-specific solutions that accompany and support some of the forms that we're going to be talking about today. I'm not going to show you all of these today. We're actually going to touch on a couple, but some of the industry-specific solutions that we have are a credit card reconciliation solution, a time management solution, purchase order inventory, a subcontractor portal, and also some daily field reporting and what have you. And there are many more that are on the way that will again be supporting many of the forms and what have you that you could be working with. Basically, the workflow is designed where once you've filled out a form, depending on where it's filled out, it really doesn't matter where it's filled out, but once that form is filled out, there is routing associated with it, so you can route it to various people for review and approval. Once that process is done and the form is complete, that information can then be sent over to TimberScan and ultimately can also reside in Sage 300. Notice how the integration here works both ways, because the eForms, i.e. Core Cloud Systems, also allows you to extract information from Sage 300. What I mean by that is it's doing an active search of certain master files, for example, the job file, the vendor file, the employee file. Similar to the way for anyone that's using TimberScan today, it works the same way with TimberScan. So it's syncing that same data from Sage 300 that you would get from TimberScan. There are really four kind of key features to the Core Cloud Systems application. There's a forms wizard. So the forms wizard is basically the place that you go to create the forms themselves initially. There's workflow. So if you wanted to be able to route documents or forms to various people for review and approval, you can do so. It has a very flexible reporting tool, which I'll show as we go into this a little bit further. And then also it allows you to create what are called global folders. So you can manage these documents in either TimberScan and or folders on your desktop. You really can kind of manipulate or toggle back and forth if you want. Basically what happens is that when a form is filled out and it's completed, it can drop it into various folders on your desktop or on your system in total. And you can also save those same forms in TimberScan. So if you want to call them up in TimberScan and see a particular document that someone may have filled out and completed, you can see it there. As I mentioned, the possibilities are endless. We can go into various different aspects of an organization and handle things like payroll timesheets, credit card receipts, daily reports, purchase orders, and so on and so forth. So with that, what I'm going to do is break out of the PowerPoint slide and go into the application, and we're going to walk through some various aspects of the system. So basically, where I typically start is, let's take a current scenario. Let's say, for example, that someone is, they're going out to do some, they're traveling for business. This is a scenario, a real life scenario that actually occurred within our organization. So whenever I would go out and travel for business, when I returned, I would have to take my receipts from whatever I purchased and what have you while I was traveling for business. And then I would have to come into this expense reimbursement form that we created using Excel. And I would go through, fill out my various information associated with what it was that I accumulated. And then I would take this form, I would take the receipts, and I would copy them and then email everything to accounting in order to get reimbursed for my expenses. So the idea behind this is to eliminate that process, eliminate having to make copies of the receipts. Instead, we'll be able to attach receipts or take pictures of the receipts right to the form. And also eliminate these one-off Excel spreadsheets in order to be able to accomplish something, but instead create your own form using your own criteria, using it within the application. So basically, I've already logged into the application, and I'll go back and show you what the login looks like. But as you notice here, I just selected a web browser. I put in my credentials, and it took me to my home page. On my home page, I have various information, which I'll talk about in a few moments. But basically, where I want to go first is I want to talk about what happens when we initially start out and you need to set up a form. So to do that, basically where you go is into this forms management tool. And then from here, you create your own forms. Now there are a group of prepackaged forms that come with the application up front, but as you can see here, I've created a number of forms for myself. I've got actually 4 pages worth of forms here that I typically work with. I'm going to start by talking about credit cards, the credit card application. So let's take an example similar to what I was talking about with the expense reimbursements. Let's say that, for example, that you have employees who are making purchases using credit cards. And then what happens is they're sending in the receipts. You're struggling to try and get those receipts in. You have the statement that comes in from the credit card company. Now you're trying to reconcile the statement against the receipts. And ultimately, at some point, you need to process that statement and you need to pay the credit card company. So we're going to start off by talking about how you could create a form that could allow people to attach their receipts to a credit card form. So basically where I am here, I'm starting out, and I've already got a credit card form set up, but I just want to show you an example of how this works. So it starts out with what's called a forms wizard. And basically the first thing you do is you just give the form a name, and then you have the option of creating what are called categories. So the categories are the way that you want to break down the form. So in the case of my credit card form, what I did was I had some basic card info at the top, some receipt coding, which includes jobs and cost codes, for example, in the middle of the form, and then a signature or an approval signature at the bottom of the form. But again, this is designed in whatever format that you want it to be. It's basically your form, and you're setting it up your way. Once you've established the categories, then you're basically going through a series of what are called questions and answers to decide what it is that you want on the form. So at the top of my form, I have the date, I have the vendor, I have an amount, and so on and so forth. For each of these, you have a tool that allows you to specify what type of item it is. So in the case of a date, for example, I'm using a date format to be able to allow for this to process. In the case of a vendor or a job, for example, I can actually pull information directly from Sage 300 to match up if I want to. So if I'm filling out this form and I want to validate on the vendor code, or I want to validate the job number or cost code, for example, I can pull that information directly from Sage 300 the same way that TimberScan can validate on these fields as well. So it's a matter of going through and setting up your form, and then ultimately what will happen is that from this form people will start filling it out. So let's say that we've gone through and we've created a credit card form. From there, you basically deploy it out to the people that you want to be utilizing the form, and then they can, sometimes you can break this down if you want by jobs if you want, so you could have forms that are related to various jobs. But the easier thing to do is just go to My Forms. These are the forms that I have that I would be filling out. And then in the case of the credit card form, just click on the Fill Out button. It opens up that form, and I start filling out the information. Now, as I mentioned, this is truly a mobile application. So I'm filling this out on my desktop at the moment. But for example, if I wanted to fill this out on an iPhone, for example, or an Android device, it basically sizes to whatever phone or mobile application that you want. And I'm going to demonstrate how you would see this on an iPad using the app in just a couple of moments. But again, it's just filling out the information. If I want to validate, I'm not sure if I actually said that this was a validated field. It is. So now it's going out and it's searching the vendor master file for me to plug in power equipment rental. So I'm simply coming in here, I'm plugging in, for example, the dollar. TimberScan and or Sage 300, or it could route the form to potentially to my supervisor for them to be able to review. So let's back up here for a second, and I'm going to back out of here, and I want to show, while we're doing this, I want to also show the mobile app on my iPad. Okay, make this a little bit bigger so we can see it better. And basically, again, I have an app that you can basically download this app from the App Store. I just go in, I select my form. If it's a credit card, for example, I go through the process of putting in my card info. Maybe it's the last 4 digits of the credit card, whatever that might be. And I'm just filling out this information right on the form. I'm putting in my vendor code. Again, it validates what vendor it is. I plug that information in. Now, ultimately, if I want to take a picture of the receipt, I could take a picture. I can select an image or, whatever it is that I want to do. So if I just needed to snap a picture of a receipt, I could do so at this point. And then as I'm doing my job coding, same scenario takes place. So if, for example, I want to validate the job number and the cost code and so on, I can do so. As I finalize this, all I have to do is hit the submit button, and it sends that data back into the application. And then from there, the next step in the process takes place. Now, if that next step means that it gets routed, then it potentially got routed to various people. So let's go back over here to the desktop, and let's do this. For some reason that got delayed here, so I'm just going to log back into the application. Okay, so let's continue this scenario forward. Let's say, for example, that form, that credit card form that was filled out, when it was submitted, it got routed to, for example, a supervisor. Now, in the role of the supervisor, if I come in my inbox, these are forms that have been routed to me. The unfinished forms are the ones that I haven't completed. Obviously, I have several here. But if I just go into my inbox, I can see what's been routed to me. So someone routed a credit card form to me. I can open it up, see how it was completed, and then if I need to sign the form, I can do so. If I want to e-sign it, I can do that. And then I can submit the form, and if that finalizes the process, then that form can do several things. It can be rendered and saved back in the application. It could be sent with a copy over to TimberScan and stored in TimberScan AIM, for example. And ultimately, if there's any integration, in this case, typically there probably wouldn't be, but if there were any integration with Sage 300, it could send data over to Sage 300. So let's say, for example, that people have gone through the process of filling out the form. It's been confirmed and approved and what have you. So now we arrive at the point where under the apps area, I have certain applications that will allow me to go one step further with those forms. So not just filling out the form and updating TimberScan or Sage 300, but also processing data from within the core cloud systems application. So I'm going to bring up the credit card solution here first. And let's go ahead and reset this. So basically what you're seeing is in this particular application, what I'm able to do is I can download the credit card statement from the credit card company. I have an example of Amex here, but it could be anyone. It could be Lowe's, Home Depot, whatever it might be. On the left-hand side, what I have are the transactions that were downloaded from the statement itself. So I imported this. We just create a file link to be able to import the statement. It gets downloaded. The transactions are here on the left. On the right-hand side are the receipts that people have submitted so far. So they went through, they filled out their form, they submitted the receipt. Now the receipt information is sitting over here on the right. When I click on the reconcile button, what it will do is it will basically try to do a match, matching up the credit card number, the amount, the vendor, and the date. And anywhere that it creates a match, which I'll do now, it takes those reconciled transactions and drops them down here into the reconciled queue. If when the receipts were being, forms were being filled out, if, for example, the job and cost code and GL account code had been filled in, that information would already be updated here. If not, you still have the option of being able to edit certain fields and what have you. And again, if there were other fields that you need to edit, we can open this up and allow for any other editing that needs to take place. Now I still have, looks like we've got a blank transaction here, but I still have 3 transactions here where we don't have a receipt yet. So if you click on the RR button, that stands for Retrieve Receipt. What that does is it sends an email notification to the cardholder. And basically in the email, it's letting them know that we're looking for the receipt based on this amount, the vendor, and the transaction date. All they have to do on their end is click on the hyperlink from the email, and it immediately opens up their form, and they can start processing their form. They can attach the receipt, they submit it back into the system, it's now updated in the receipts queue, and I can take that and I can match that up against the transaction and reconcile. So we've seen clients who were taking 2.5 to 3 days to reconcile their transactions. They've cut it down to 1.5 hours to 2 hours. Now, once this is done, basically all I have to do at this point is click on this Transfer to TimberScan button. What it will do is it will take that reconciled statement and it creates an invoice that gets sent over to TimberScan automatically, fully coded with all of the transactional data. If you want the receipts to be created as separate invoices, you could do that, or if you want to attach the receipts as supporting documents to the invoice, you can do that. But either way, you've already created the invoice. It's fully coded in TimberScan. The only thing you have to do if there's any more routing and approval that takes place, you would basically send it on for any other routing and approval, and the process is completed, and Sage 300 gets updated with a fully coded invoice at that point. So that's an example of the credit card solution. Let's back up and talk about a different scenario, because another situation that has become very popular is time entry. And there are a number of lots of different flavors when it comes to time entry. So basically, again, you could set up a form where someone could fill out a timesheet. And it's your form. You're basically creating the criteria associated with the form, and you're plugging in the information. So as someone is filling out a timesheet, maybe there's a signature that they have to fill in. And then when they submit this, if you want this routed to various people, maybe this goes to the supervisor or what have you, or it goes to the payroll manager. Again, what you're doing as you're going through the forms creation process is you're determining what workflow processes you want to build with each form. Similar to building workflows in TimberScan, you build workflows here. So I can fill out my timesheet, and I could again do this using any type of format that I want. So I could be filling out my timesheet on my iPhone, and I get done, I submit it, and then that timesheet gets sent back into the application, and if it was going off to a supervisor, that person could open it up. They could see, here's Michelle's timesheet or whatever, and then they sign off, they complete the submission, and then if you want, that two things could potentially happen. That timesheet could be sent over to TimberScan, so now you have a copy of someone's timesheet in the repository in TimberScan AIM. But you can also send the metadata over to Sage 300. So someone doesn't have to go through the process of taking that data and rekeying all of that information into payroll. We send it to the basically to an import file, and it's exported here, and it's sitting waiting for someone to import into payroll, and it can upload the payroll system with that completed data automatically. So it does not require any additional coding at that point. So again, using the forms concept, you can do it this way. We do have some additional payroll or timesheet solutions that clients have requested, and they're available. So for example, sometimes we have clients that want to, for example, fill out their time in a crew-based format. So we've created this dashboard where someone can go in, they can decide what job someone's working on or what have you. And as they process this, they could open up that particular timesheet. And as you can see here, basically it kind of creates what looks like almost like a spreadsheet format. And when I opened this up, what I did was, again, I could be selective here. So if I wanted to select a different crew or whatever it might be, I can do so. I can select what employees I want. But basically, once I've selected, it then brings this timesheet format up for me to be able to go through and say, on job 03001, what cost codes do I want to work with? If it doesn't validate the cost code, I can go search and I can find my cost codes. But what I'm doing ultimately is I'm actually going through and I'm filling out the time for this particular person. And again, this format is highly flexible, highly customizable. So in this case, this particular format was regular per diem mileage and what have you, but anything else that a client needs, this can be designed to meet your specifications. Once this process is done, once again, save the form or save this format and then decide where it goes from there. Do we save it in as a timesheet or a series of timesheets in TimberScan AIM? Do we send the data over to Sage 300 and allow you to key in time card information directly from there? So there are lots of different flavors and lots of different options with respect to how people are using the application. We have some clients who want to be able to create what's called a daily report. So what they've done is they've created a form for people to fill out, and same concept where someone's going in, they're filling out information. It could be what job it's associated with, weather conditions, all the information that's associated with this. Once this is filled out, there's a great deal of reporting capability that's associated with the application. So all of the different components, all of the different fields, let me just back up for 1 second. So on each form, when I'm going to go back to that daily report for just a second. Each one of these fields can be designed so that it can be reportable. So as you're creating the fields, when you use the Forms wizard, you create the field, you decide, for example, which of these fields do you want reportable? It could be all of them if you want them to be. And then once you've decided, then basically what happens is that I can create whatever reports I want. I believe I have a daily report already saved here, but let's go look. I do. So what it allows me to do is take all of the reportable fields, and when I select them, and I can be selective if I want to go down through here. Maybe this time when I decide I want to generate this report, I don't want to select the weather. Maybe another time I do. But once I've gone through and I've selected my various fields, you just generate the grid, and it pulls up the data from the forms that have been created and drops the information into the queue like this. I can export this to Excel if I want. I can generate the grid, do whatever I want to do with it here. So this is an example of how you can, run a daily report and then download it if you need to. I should also mention that every form, as you may have noticed, not only are you to create, for example, a PDF output of the form. So when you're setting up the wizard, and I mentioned how in the wizard you can go through and create different categories. So maybe with the various categories, what you're doing is you're selecting the various criteria that you want to be laid out on the PDF form itself. And then when you're generating this information, you're always able to once the form has been filled out, generate a PDF out of this. So here's an example of a change order form where it was, I created the form itself and for people to fill out, but I also created this output so that I can send this off. You could do the same type thing with a daily report. So with the daily report, I can generate that and have it formatted in such a way that it goes out as a PDF output. But at the same time, I can also be flexible where I could go in, create my search criteria, and create what more like an Excel spreadsheet view of that particular form so that I can be very creative in terms of how I want to inquire into that particular form. Okay, so I'm going to stop at this point, I guess, and just open it up for questions.